of IR that we have been deliberating upon in this pandemic period, if the concepts of IR are adequate enough to explain what is evolving in front of us. That is one point. Or what will be the entry point of international relations in the post-pandemic period? Or, if I may say so, during the pandemic period, is it going to be the nation state? Or is it going to be a civilization discourse? What is it that will be our entry point? In international relations, we have been debating with different concepts and theories of IR, beginning with modern international relations, beginning with realism, then neorealism, behavioralism, structuralism. I can go on and on. The debate between the constructivists, the critical theorists, and the traditional theories, these are on in international relations. Then the civilization discourse also made, I would say, made a comeback or reappeared in modern international relations. I'm emphasizing on the point modern international relations after the demise of the Soviet Union with Huntington's famous book, The Clash of Civilization. Both to announce on behalf of the General Committee that the first collection of papers which were presented during the IR conference on celebrating 100 years of IR, the papers are out. These have been published in the Journal of International Relations of the department. May I please request Niloy to share the screen?
Can you see it now?
Yes, we can see.
We have there are 36 papers were presented. Out of those, 6 have been published in this. You can see that we were celebrating 100 years of IR. The editorial team is there with us. The authors are there. Thank you very much. The conference was held in January 2020. And at that time, we were thinking of revisiting and re-questioning international relations, but one never knew that it would reach a point there where we would start thinking that if IR since 1919 would really give way to IR since 2019, we are at a point. Let me please request the departmental chair, Professor Ruhul Amin, to give his remarks, his welcome remarks. Yes, Professor Ruhul. Ruhul, are you there?
He's there, but he's muted.
Ruhul, can you unmute Ruhul?
Yeah. So, are you okay now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, okay, sir. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Professor Dr. Amina Mohsin, moderator of the webinar series of the Department of International Relations, Professor Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed and Professor Dr. Delor Hossain, two paper presenters in today's session, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning and good afternoon, and possibly good night. I welcome all of you to this webinar series organized by the Department of International Relations. As you are aware from the presentation of Professor Dr. Amina Mohsin, that the Department of International Relations has planned to organize monthly webinar series on different aspects of international relations. And today's session will be around Huntington, in his analysis, gave the clash of civilizations in the early 1990s. We also see Francis Fukuyama, who gave the idea of the end of history. So we are absolutely in the crisis of international relational discourse in today's century. And in the context of these realities, we are entering, we have already entered into the 21st century international relations. So the two papers that will be presented today will highlight on the realities and the context and the contents of the changing dimensions of international relations. As I understand, the international relations should be as old as humankind. Humans started actions. As soon as the human civilization started, there were actions, reactions, and interactions. And the course of international relations have been the series of these human civilizations. And in the ancient time, there were luminous civilizations that had and that should have been wonderful contributions to the onset of the building of international relations immediately after the Second World War. Unfortunately, to me, however, the post Second World War international relations based on the United Nations system failed massive ancient civilizations. I hope that the paper presented by Professor Dr. Imtiaz Hamid will highlight on the different aspects of the civilizations and their contributions to the building of international relations theories. And the real challenge for him would be to relate to the civilizational contribution to the making and remaking and the implementing foreign policy of Bangladesh. And Professor Delal Hossain, as I understand, is coming with the role of the great powers today, and and he will be challenging the theoretical debate and on the discourse of international relations. As I said before, we are living in the era of news and post. So, are we thinking to live in the post-UN system? It's a very big question. Let me remind one thing that there was a project in early 1980s, MOONS, multilateralism, and the United Nations system. And the purpose of the project, as you know, was to think of the theoretical changes, theoretical discourse in the changed context of international relations in the post-Cold War. So as I said, there was clash of civilizations by Huntington and end of history by, and also by Kupchan's, the decline of America. Now we see the rise of many great powers. We see rise of China, we see rise of India, we see rise of Turkey, we see rise of Iran. And we see the fresh changing characteristic nations in the global politics, including that of Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. So what would be the theoretical debate? And the real challenge for Professor Delor would be to relate the Bangladesh perspective to the changing context of international relations. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome to the well-known professor International Relations University Dhaka, Professor Dr. Imtiaz Ahmed and Professor Dr. Delor Hossain. I want to close now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the department. Our first speaker will go right into the program. As it is, we are running a little late because of certain technical glitches. But I would request Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, Department of International Relations. He's going to talk on civilization foundations of Bangladesh foreign policy. Dr. Ahmed, I believe, needs no introduction in this forum. Not only on the futures of IR, but also trying to root international relations back to the soil of Bangladesh for Bangladesh foreign policy. So Imtiaz, the floor is all yours. And if you may limit yourself to 20 minutes, that would be very helpful. Thank you. Can you please unmute Imtiaz?
policy, particularly looking into the civilizational foundation. Now, my first slide is on, we got this idea wrong that republicanism came from the West. Way back and through different authors now, different critiques, and there are several of them who point out that Bengal probably, if you look at a Republican form of government, probably Bengal was the earliest one before the Greek civilization. I also have to add very quickly, even Africa also had Republican form of government long before Europe. But the hegemonic discourse of Europe somehow displaced everything, not to mention the whole Lichavi dynasty and the Lichavi Republic from our memory. Lichavi Republic is also mentioned in the Mahabharata, and this is quite unfortunate because people do read Mahabharata quite a lot, but somehow they have not really gone into that. And Kotilla in Arthashastra also mentions about Ganashangho. So here is Kotilla in the Mahabharata. You have Lichavi Republic mentioned very clearly that they were elected, but somehow that got lost. But then, interestingly, Pal dynasty, if you come back to Pal dynasty, the Gopal was an elected Raja, and he came from a very humble background. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can hear you.
Is there a problem? Okay. So the Pal dynasty is also an interesting one, and people have forgotten that the whole Pal dynasty was in Bengal for over 400 years. The Shen dynasty, which actually is not did not come from Bengal, it came from South India, where outsiders. They ruled Bengal only for 60 years, very 60 odd years, till the arrival of Bukhtiyar Khilji. And it was very easy for Bukhtiyar Khilji to get into because the Sufis actually got the tradition back from what would be referred to as a very tolerant.
Others, please mute their microphone.
Thank you. So if the tolerant version of Buddhism was there in Bengal for years, including the birthplace of Tantric Buddhism. There are authors who would say it was in part of the Greater Bengal. In fact, more into Bangladesh, part of Greater Bengal, that the Tantric Buddhism came up. And that's precisely the reason why we have Lalun coming out, the whole Baulian tradition coming out from the Tantric Buddhist understanding of things. I'll come back to Lalun later on, but keep in mind the Lichavi Republic, and then you have the Pal, Gopal being the elected Raja, and unfortunately, you have a serious gap for years, and then you have 1971 in a very meaningful way. And to make it sure, I think the policymakers at the time thought that we should put the word people also. Republic actually means people. Very few countries would have these two words, People's Republic. Well, China has it. Maybe to distinguish itself from Taiwan, which is also called Republic of China. So probably they added People's Republic. But we wanted to make sure that this republic is people. But republic means people in any way. It doesn't mean the hierarchy or the blood, the lineage. Now, what happened in the meantime? Why? You have 12th century, and then you have the Shen dynasty, and then you have in the 18th century more precisely on 1757, the British got in. Now, Nazim Hikmat, one of famous Turkish poet, has a fantastic line which will give you a sense why British or the Europeans came all the way from Europe to Bengal. And his line is an interesting one. He says, "If there is honey in my pot, bees will come from Baghdad." So Bengal had the honey in 18th century. Just to keep that in mind, and I'll come back the 18th century scenario. So something went wrong during the colonialism phase, because colonialism, or the British colonialism, is a totally different kind of an external power than the others. Whether it's the Turks or the Mughals, they were also there, but they became literally Indians or South Asians by staying here, by marrying here. But the British or the English got their wives all the way from Britain and did not mingle, and not to mention they looted the things from Bengal and took them to what is now known as British Museum. Now, what happened is you have a serious cartographical massacre of Greater Bengal. And the first one was 1874. I'll show a series of maps which will give you a sense of how the British was so sensitive and so got panicked with Bengal. And I think still they don't sleep when they think about Bengal or even Bangladesh at this moment. 1874 was the first time. What they did was to delink Assam. And interestingly, there were 3 Bengali-speaking districts of Sylhet, Kachar, and Goalpara in that separation. So it's an interesting one. Why would you do that? Well, the idea was, and for the sake of administration, but I'll give you a clear understanding today of why they did it. The next one was 1905 and 1911. Now this is an interesting one. If you look at the 1905, they created Bengal presidency on the one hand, which had Bihar and Orissa together. Bihar and Orissa, was part, as I say, we call it Greater Bengal, but it's part of Bengal. So Bihar and Orissa were there in the Bengal presidency, and then the British created Eastern Bengal and Assam. Now, when Bengal got reunited because of the protest and the agitation, and it was revoked in 1911, the interesting part was Bengal was united without Bihar, Orissa, and Assam. The Bihar and Orissa and Assam never came forward. So this is the cleverness of Britain, of colonial Britain. And why they did it, there is a clear statement in 1904. Those who are not familiar with that, I will request, I will read it out just for the sake, so that you remember. This is what Mr. H.H. Risley, who was the Home Secretary to the Government of India, wrote to Lord Curzon. And I'm quoting Mr. Risley. "Bengal united is a power. Bengal divided will pull in several different ways. One of our main objects is to split up and thereby weaken a solid body of opponents to our rule. A separate administration, a separate high court, and a separate university at Dhaka, to which I belong and my colleagues belong, would give extra opportunities to the Muslim middle class to emerge from their backward state and weaken the economic base of the Hindu middle class." Now, the next 2 lines are very interesting. "The Hindu zamindari patrons to the Congress would find the Muslim peasantry range against them." And the last line is a fantastic one. "It would divide the nationalistic ranks once and for all," unquote. So, and that came in 1947, the partition of what remained as Bengal. And that's precisely the reason why I say it was a cartographical massacre of Bengal. You don't have Bihar and Orissa is out. You have Assam out. Still they thought that Bengal is too big and could be powerful. So they divided, or even the people of Bengal fell for it, or the politicians fell for it. And what we have now is a serious cartographical kind of context when it comes to Greater Bengal. Now, the tragic history of Bengal, now, if you remember, I mentioned the 18th century. In the 18th century, China was the largest economy in the world. What you have in China is re-rise. So those who say rise of China, they make a mistake. China is a very old civilization. In 18th century, they were the largest economy in any way. So what they have is 18th century, they lost out 19th and 20th. Now in 18th century, undivided India, and I want to emphasize the word undivided. Undivided India was the second largest economy in the world. And in that undivided India, Bengal was the richest province. And that's precisely the reason why Nazim Hikmat's poem makes sense, that if there is honey in my pot, bees will come from Baghdad. We did not go to England. Well, now we go because the honey is there. No more honey here. So now we go on a reverse direction. Now, the first image is an interesting one. It's a giraffe. This is, you know, the Sultan dynasty, particularly, this is the time of Sultan Shihabuddin Bayezid, who actually sent the giraffe from Bengal to China. So we had an interesting relationship, South Asia with China, and that's something to look into. The middle picture is of the Muslim, which was so, you know, popular at that point of time, and people have also forgotten. And this, you can go to a Smithsonian Museum in Washington, D.C., and if you see the Wright brothers plane, the materials they used, it was muslin. Although they write, they say it is a muslin because that was the lightest, you know, element you can get to fly something. So the Wright brothers actually used muslin, but the museum people thought to write it differently. And it's right, muslin, the pride of the West. Now, why would muslin become pride of the West? But nobody goes there and correct this, you know, because we go there, we pay Smithsonian Museum. It's absolutely a false history, but then it is there. At least when I went, well, several years back, but I don't think they have corrected. But you know, I wrote them a small piece on it, but I don't know whether they have corrected or not. Now, from the richest province in the 18th century, you have 1943. Look at the tragedy. And look at the statement of Winston Churchill. You know, I hate Indians, you know, it's a beastly religion, all, you know. Well, Shashi Tharoor made a, you know, he uses it several times. But Churchill, who got a Nobel Prize, well, for his English writing though, but hailed as an extraordinary politician, but simply a racist, downright racist, because for him, actually, we had, and I will show this whole famine that we had in 1943 was largely what you call Churchill contributed to it. Now, very quickly, from there you have the genocidal partitions of the two-nation theory. Now, this is important. Now, people have forgotten the father of the two-nation theory is not Jinnah, actually, though he gets the credit for some, so I don't know why he gets the credit. The father of two-nation theory is actually James Mill. James Mill, who was first commissioned to write the history of British India for the first time in the entire historiography of South Asia, made Hindus and Muslims nation. And the reason he did it was Europe at that time was divided, the history of Europe was divided into a triadic, in a trinity. And it comes from the religious Holy Trinity kind of understanding. Anyway, I don't want to go into that debate now, but in a triadic formulation, ancient, medieval, modern. So when James Mill was given the task to write, he never came to India. He never landed his foot on India, actually, to write the first book on the history of British India in 1817. He went to British Museum and just, you know, superimposed, as we can say, the ancient, medieval, modern, and said ancient period is the Hindu period, medieval is the Muslim period, and he's a very clever guy. He said, not not Christian period. The modern period became the British period. Now, British or English is a nation. Hindu and Muslim is a religious context, but for the first time, the Hindus and the Muslims, they become nation. Now, that was taken by the Hindu Mahasabha, the President Savarkar, in 1923, and this was 17 years before Muhammad Ali Jinnah. He then, advocated this idea of two-nation theory, and then you have Muhammad Ali Jinnah, and if you have read Jaswant Singh's book, was incidentally thrown out of BJP for writing that book on Jinnah, makes it clear that it was for bargaining point, whatever it is. Jinnah comes third when it comes to the two-nation theory. But two-nation theory is what contributed in 1947, the first genocidal partition, and of course, also the 1971. Over 1 million got killed in 47. In 71, the official figure is 3 million. Now, that two-nation theory somehow has come back to modern India. Now, maybe we can have another debate later on the current BJP's reproducing the two-nation theory. But what happened to Bangladesh? And this is interesting. Bangladesh in 1971, this is a South Asian exceptionalism. Bangladesh is the only country in South Asia which actually fought a liberation war. India could have come because, could have made it if Mr. Bose and his Indian National Army, if they could have made a difference, but that did not happen. Here you have in 71, and this is an exceptionalism, and that's precisely the reason people don't understand Bangladesh. I'm being very honest. The rest of South Asia, either they would put, 1947 or the two-nation theory. They can't understand Bangladesh. The reason is other countries did not have 1971. 1971 is a unique experience where you had the people and the military together, or the entire population. And I was just a class 9 student, believe it or not. I was just a class 9 student, but I left my parents, went to Agartala, slept on the pavement, literally slept on the pavement before I got a place to, where I could stay. But then in those, a class 9 student, well, now probably they'll say a child soldier, but in those days, it was quite normal. If you look at the age of the, all the noted majors, bulk of them are young. Even we have some of them here who are freedom fighters. They were all very young. That combination, and we as a class 9 student, we were 15 or 16 when together when we left, when we crossed the border, we were actually led by a BDR Jawan, not even an officer, a BDR Jawan, and we gave him the full responsibility because he's the only one who knew how to use arms. He knew, what is strategy and what to hide and not. None of us knew that. So this mixing of people with other forces, you don't have that, and you don't have 71 without genocide. That's the point. Genocide is critical. Now I'll go very quickly now because of the time. Now from there you have a foreign policy principles, which I'm sure all of you would know: friends towards all, allies towards none. It was talked about even during 9 months in different contexts, but officially we have 23rd May 1973 when Bangabandhu made it very clear, and I quote him: "We firmly believe in policy of friendship to all and malice towards none, the policy of peaceful coexistence," unquote. This is in an official document. You get this particular statement, and this he reiterated also at the UN in 1974 on 25th September, and he spoke as you know, he spoke there in Bangla, to which I will come back, why he did that. The English translation is, the Bengali people have fought over the centuries. Look at the statement, fought over the centuries, not fought for 25 years. People miss some of these lines. You know, we miss them for some reason. The Bengali people have fought over the centuries so that they may secure for themselves the right to live in freedom and with dignity as free citizen of a free country. They have aspired to live in peace and friendship with all the nations of the world. Now, why this is important? In 1973, believe it or not, we were not even, member of the UN. We hardly had friends. Some countries even did not recognize. Bulk of the Middle East countries did not recognize. China did not recognize. But the policymakers, of course, Bangabandhu had the courage to say, friendship towards all, malice towards none. And this he really practiced. Look at this 3 dates, and this is so important. In April 1972, US was against us. And as you know, particularly Nixon and Kissinger policy, well, they always try to frame it in that way that, but what mattered was the United States was not with us. Their entire machinery was helping the other side. But April 1972, we get the US recognition. And then see February 1974, OIC and Pakistan's recognition. This is a tremendous courage that a country can have. And then, of course, you get the full membership in September 1974. This whole diplomacy of recognition, and I want to emphasize that, is linked to the civilizational context that we have. It's friendship towards all and malice towards none. And you will see how contemporary that thing is even today. And then, of course, you have the cultural diplomacy, how culture made difference to Bangladesh, and I can bet on that. It will make a difference to Bangladesh. And that's precisely the reason I say sometimes people don't understand. Regimes, yes, have come who have neglected some of these things, what I'm saying, but you have seen that they also had tough time with the people. Now, Baul's Lalon and Rabindranath, they go together with Amar Sonar Bangla. The lyric is of Rabindranath, but the tune is Baul. The tune is not Tagore's. We would know what the Baulian tune is about. And the Bauls, well, this is not what they call the platform that I want to discuss, the Baul tradition. The Bauls actually rejected the state, and went to exile. And they still reject the state. So this rejecting the state, a little bit of anarchism, or intellectual anarchism, has been a part of Bengal. And I can, one can see even that in Tagore. Now, the language made a difference. And here is Bangabandhu speaking at the UN in Bangla. And that's something to be noted. And then you can see 21st February, which is a critical date for us, which is a date where we all mourn, in fact. All are barefooted. Dhaka University, this is the only university in the world, though we don't get marked for, in the ranking, we don't get that as a category. But believe it or not, if that is a category, we probably would be in the first 3 or 4. Dhaka University is the only university in the world which hosts a national event where the Vice Chancellor stands to receive the President, the Prime Minister, the entire dignitaries. No other university does that anywhere in the world. Not to mention Dhaka University is the only university which raised the flag and gave it to the leaders. Now, that 21st February, and it takes almost 3 months for university faculty members to work on it. Now, 21st February was transformed into a celebration. It's now an International Mother Language Day, and it's a celebration of language. Where will you get a culture where a mourning, where you literally, grieve for something, and you go to the graveyard also, but then it's celebrated globally? The Bengalis had the courage to come up and think of making something which is really sad to something which is absolutely beautiful. The other thing, very quickly, what we have, and this is very contemporary, Bangladesh has a growth relatively, we are doing a little bit better maybe, and I always say relatively, growth without enmity. Bangladesh literally does not have any enemies. Other countries want to make us enemies, but somehow we are not interested in making enemies. Look at Bangladesh is everywhere, and the big ones also. The One Belt, Belt Road Initiative. We're also in the Indo-Pacific Alliance. You talk BISIM, BBIN, SARC, BIMSTEC. Give any organization, Bangladeshis would say, we are ready for it. And this has a civilizational context. We never, even with Myanmar, this is an interesting part. We have 1.1 million Rohingya refugees, which is a bigger population than Bhutan. And Bhutan took 60,000 years, but this little Bhutan that we are, more than Bhutan that we have in Bangladesh, got established in 3 months. Keep that in mind, 1.1 million, Bhutan's population is only 800,000. Now, this growth with enmity made a difference to Bangladesh, what we have. We are closing the gap. If you look at the life expectancy at birth, which I think is very important, we are actually doing better than Pakistan and India, both of which got independence in 1947, whereas we got in 1971. We are almost catching China. We're 72.5, whereas China is 76.3. I think that's remarkable. If you look at other of the infant mortality rate, I think here also Bangladesh is doing pretty well, though China is well ahead on that. Now, we can come back to the discussion, but because of the time, let me just, I have only 2 more slides and I'll stop. People thought the pandemic would make a real problem and got scared. And, they were really making scary stories about what will happen to Bangladesh. But look, the ADB comes out with a revised growth projection and says, well, not really bad. Probably Bangladesh is going to do good. Well, it has done pretty good despite the pandemic, if you compare to other countries, and we can come back why that is so. But the fear that was thrown in the first 2 months, and we map them, Center for Genocide Studies, we map every week. I think some of you get this, what you call these graphics that we have, COVID-19 graphics, and you can see how the fear got up in April and then came down. And of course, the sensitivity to human sufferings, the plight of the stateless Rohingyas. Now, these people have forgotten probably when they were coming, the first 2 weeks was really a problem. Even members of the ruling regime, some of the members of the ruling regime were actually advocating to block the borders. But some of us, many those who are in the platform also say, no, we can't do that. And then, of course, our Prime Minister had the courage to say, no, we can't do that. We have 1971 in our head. How can we stop the Rohingyas? The Bangladeshis, this is interesting, I want to flag. They have supported movements. If you come to Dhaka University, you will see they have marched on any movements anywhere in the world, probably, and people have forgotten the first time students who got killed because of police firing. People have forgotten that. The first time in independent Bangladesh, they died not for anything to do with Bangladesh. And you'll be surprised. 2 students died for Vietnam. So when I heard that Vietnam was supporting Myanmar, I was telling some officials that we should go and tell the Vietnamese that our students died for you. No Myanmaris died for you back when you had, bombarded by the United States. Now, very quickly, what are the challenges? And this is my last slide. What are the challenges to the civilizational quest? Well, we understand, you can see some of the things that I've discussed, but let us talk about the 4 challenges, and I'll not talk much, just 2 minutes and I'll stop. One particular challenge is we have not had, I think, a serious brainstorming of the modern state that we have, the Westphalian state. It has not done good service. And we have a fantastic poet. He passed away though, Shoaib Qadri. And I think Shoaib Qadri put it in a very interesting way. He said, Rashtra money, left, right, left, right. State means left, right, left, right. This modern state can't do without being left, right, left, right. I don't want to bring United States here, but there are other countries as well. We have not imagined of different kind of state. Tagore wrote a lot about it actually. He was very critical of the modernity and the modern state, but somehow Tagore was not seen as a serious thinker, social thinker. He was more a poet, so everybody thought, oh, he must be an idealist. But now with Derrida and Foucault and the entire post-structuralist, post-modernist discourse, people are looking into. This is one challenge that we need to reinvent. And I have some answers, but we can come back later. The second challenge is the fallout of globalization, because the fallout of globalization has gone to the politics of singularity. What you have now in the United States, and this is the sad part, the pandemic came at a time when the politics of singularity was at the top. In the United States, in Brazil, in UK, in India, in Australia, all went for politics of singularity, and the pandemic hit them hard. Had to, because the virus doesn't understand singularity. That's the point. The virus doesn't understand borders or ethnicity, religion, and we can talk later on. It came at a time because some people got scared of what globalization was doing to some other powers, because other powers also were coming up. And I always say that Bangladesh has to guard itself, because the more it develops, the more enemies it's going to have, internal as well as external. The third one is the fourth industrial revolution, the digital divide. This is very important, because our education, bulk of, for colonial reason and for other reasons, is still, the thinking comes from the West. But they're good for West. They are not good for, non-West. It can't be. And the digital divide can go in a different direction unless and until we change our curriculum, we change our educational understanding of things, we change our knowledge, and from primary to tertiary level, it has to be rooted absolutely in the soil and soul of Bangladesh. If we don't do that, the digital divide is going to really hit you hard. And finally, we have a serious absence of Bangladesh dream. Now, people talk about Sonar Bangla. Keep in mind, Sonar Bangla, when it came, it meant it had relationship with, the ripening of the rice and the jute. But that is not going to attract the young generation. So absence of Bangladesh dream, we need to create. Otherwise, everybody would fall for the American dream. Now that the American dream is facing a serious problem, maybe the chances are more minds would be put into this idea of Bangladesh dream. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Imtiaz. It was indeed a very, I would say, colorful as well as a very, I would say, profound presentation on your part. But I would leave you with only this question, that when you talk about civilization foundations of Bangladesh foreign policy, the path that you trekked through, civilization also has been used as a tool of hegemony. And let us not forget that that the West used its civilizing mission to colonize and orient the East. So maybe when during the discussion we can come back to it, whether like nation, nationalism, civilization too is a middle class and an elitist concept. And if these are, since you're talking about rooting it within the soils of the land, if it is really rooted in the soil of the land? This is a question I would leave open for the panelists as well as for the, I can see that a lot of, we have many practitioners of international relations as well among our guests. So let's see how the debate goes. Now, I would request Dr. Delwar Hussain, Professor, Department of International Relations. He's going to speak on global powers and Bangladesh, the theoretical debate. Again, I must say that the department is very blessed to have very illustrious teachers amongst us who are the leading intellectuals in Bangladesh today, and they are putting their footprints as well as fingerprints all over the globe. And Dr. Delwar Hussain is a public intellectual. He has written extensively on globalization and other relevant issues pertaining to Bangladesh. Delwar, it is all yours.
Thank you, Professor Amina Mohsin, the moderator of the webinar, and also the chair of the journal subcommittee of the Department of International Relations, and Professor Mohammad Ruhul Amin, the chair of the department, and Professor Imtiaz Ahmed, who just spoke, and very senior teachers in the department, and my very respected colleagues and very distinguished participants. I could see maybe it is one of the very rare occasions that has created an opportunity for seeing all these great faces who are practitioners, and also they have experiences in dealing with these issues, and also my dear students, and good evening, everybody. My job is pretty well. It is also difficult because you can see the topic. Global powers and Bangladesh and the theoretical debate. So if you see that the title of the seminar or webinar series, it is IR Discourse, and part of IR Discourse we are talking about foreign policy, and mostly in abstract way. So what I will do, I'll try to bring some issues mostly in abstract way, or through concepts, or maybe it is rather a kind of overview of some of the very familiar concepts, ideas that we see, and some, these can be branded as Western ideas or whatever. Now I think we are living in the world where actually ideas are coming from different parts of the world, but these are the very common ideas, but I'll try to put it in the context of Bangladesh foreign policy, and also in the global context. So I'll go very quickly because I have some slides to share, and this is very different from Professor Imtiaz, because this is from picture to words. So my my presentation is full of words. So we can see a huge change in the context of regional politics, regional security, or global politics or global security, and we can just think. In 2014, when Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi came to power, and he called SAARC leaders to his inauguration. So now, if you think, do you see such kind of environment exist in South Asia, that India would invite SAARC countries, including Pakistan? So we can see how the reality changes. Even Indian Prime Minister visited Pakistan, in Lahore in December 2015. And just on a surprise visit. He went to India from Afghanistan. So just to see the changes that is happening, that are happening in our own eyes. So we are in the time where we see the shifting trends and dynamics of regional and global context. And also, as my presentation relates to global powers, or the idea of power, it is highly contested in international relations, whether it is from Western or Eastern perspective. So it is highly contested. So that I'm very aware of. And then, of course, these days we are coming to see the more of ideas or terms or phenomena in the competition, rivalry, conflict, sphere of influence, alliance, Cold War. I mean, there are so many ideas. These are not very new, but these are coming back. I mean, we are reproducing and we are giving more importance to this phenomena in today's world. So Bangladesh faces a challenging era, challenging time, no doubt about it. So global powers. I mean, the problem with global power, you see, we have two terms. One is global, another is power. So it's very, very difficult and almost impossible to have a very clear and a sort of consensus view about what is global power or great power, or for that matter, I mean, we can identify it as a hegemonic power. I mean, but I have tried to actually see the literature in IR. What the theoreticians actually in terms of I mean, when we call it global powers, I mean, we all talk about it in our real life situations, whether in talk show or in different forums. So here one of the very famous IR scholars, Kenneth Walls, I mean, he tried to define it, and you can see a name, Potter Stuart. Actually, this is the name of a American justice who actually defined, I mean, as a term like, I mean, so we see something or we understand something not by just definition. We know something just when we see it. So global power or world power is something like this. I mean, we understand it when we actually see it. So Walls actually focuses on some very, very clear criteria of global power, like size of population and territory, resource endowment, economic capability, military strength. And also, I mean, there is something very important. I mean, he also mentions about common sense, which is very important to identify powers, whether world power or great power or lesser. And another scholar actually has given rather very, very specific definition of great power. I mean, to him actually, a great power has the kind of 10% of the international system's capabilities, interest, and of course they can extend globally, and also they have recognition by others as uh, I mean, as a great power. Uh, so and then there are some more definitions of great powers, and some other scholars emphasize that major power states are those states that have expansive foreign policy portfolios and power projection capabilities. And the last one, you can see this is also the definition of hegemonic power or global power. I mean, it refers to the capability and willingness of a limited number of countries to project significant power and influence beyond their national boundaries over a reasonably lengthy period of time. So the time is very important. I mean, sometimes a power might emerge and we can see as a very influential, but then how long this influence continues, this time is very important to identify certain countries as global powers or great powers. And then we have some statistics to see the empirically what is the state of actually global powers in the world. So you can see some names starting with United States and ending with Canada in terms of economic power. And of course, this is data of 2017. So now China has overtaken USA in terms of GDP and purchasing power parity. But more or less, we can see the order of global economy is in this way. So this gives us sense in empirical world to see who are the who might be the great powers. And then in terms of military expenditure, we can see this almost same names with some exceptions of Saudi Arabia and Japan, and also United Arab Emirates, Israel. And also we can see some the list of top 25 military powers, which is quite interesting. I mean, out of these 25, top military powers in the world, 10 are from Asia. I mean, Asia in minus Middle East. And then if we include Middle East has 5 top military powers. And then the Asia has 15. And then Europe has 5. And rest are from North America, Latin America, and also Russia. So you can see Asia is also very rightly the place where actually great powers, particularly from military capability, exist. And then, I mean, this is also very important to understand the role of global powers in terms of the evolving global context, where we can see the issues and interest of global powers in terms of crisis. If we see the hotspots like Iraq, Iran, Middle East, Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, China, Darfur, North Korea, South China Sea, and Taiwan, and many more. I mean, as hotspots, these are very important to understand the global context that we actually constantly, I mean, face. And then geopolitical powers like USA, China, India, Russia, and also as a region, Africa, Latin America, Turkey, transatlantic, and Asia Pacific. And the issues where actually the interest of great powers lie, and for that matter, in fact, all countries in the world, they have some interests in these issues, and also beyond that. So nuclear weapons, climate change, terrorism, energy, peace and conflict, poverty, financial instability, and COVID-19 global pandemic is also an important issue today. Then if we want to understand the global context, of course, we see a world which is being transformed. We don't know where it is going, but it is in transition. It is in a kind of transformation. So the very understanding of power, it is being, I mean, changed, and we are seeing sort of leveling and diffusion of power, which is a bit different from the realist notion of power. And we can see the salience of trade blocs and regional organizations, of course, over the few decades, and then the re-rise of China and India, and impressive rise of developing nations, and also some regional actors are becoming very assertive, even including I mean, in the context of Gulf, if we see the relations between Qatar and Saudi Arab, we have seen that how actually Qatar challenged Saudi leadership, and it came with its own kind of space. And well, I mean, maybe a few years back, people could talk about this sort of concert of great powers, like the recreation of the 19th century concert of Europe. But now it is becoming more and more polarized, and of course, balance of power or balance of terror, of course, are there. So it's becoming more and more now. It's very polarized world. We don't know whether we can call it bipolarity, but concert is actually losing its importance in terms of a group of states who can share a multipolar world with some responsibility. So people are talking about new Cold War, and of course there are several dyads of Cold War. So the idea of multipolarism is in crisis, and so what is the situation? I mean, some say that we are returning to bipolarity, particularly putting China and USA as the global powers, and there are some conceptual observations about great power behavior. So since we don't have time, so you can see some of the kind of conceptualization of behavior that we see for great powers in the history. So normally what we see, the great powers, they seek support of subordinate states, and they have mechanisms through which they can shape political competition within these states. And also they behave in many different ways. I mean, they optimize rather than maximize the role of the state through burden sharing. They can cooperate under loose hegemony to secure global commons or public goods. I mean, this is in a very positive sense. But what is important about the global powers' behavior? I mean, they rarely solve, but manage the threats. I mean, we can see in today's world. I mean, threats are from from both traditional and non-traditional sources. And what is very important about great power behaviors that we see today is they I mean generally, I mean in the history, both I mean in the post-war period and also pre-war period, that they engage in rivalry because they have expansive issues of concerns, and they will conflict with any state in the system over a foreign policy concern, and they can provide resources to the groups they prefer. So the group or the blocks, and also they can also promise coercion to the groups they do not. So it's like uh, uh, I mean, in the Cold War period, we saw how the United States actually provided resources to the members of the countries, the U.S. bloc, and also tried to apply coercion to the Soviet bloc, and the same done by the former Soviet Union. And then since the rivalry is the key theme that I think very important, I mean both theoretically, so there are several works on understanding the great power rivalry, and I have tried to give just bring to your attention some of the concepts of rivalry. So the rivalry, I mean, if we just follow the last definition, the rivalry is simply a situation of long-standing historical animosity between two entities with a high probability of serious conflict or crisis. And during rivalry, relative positions matter, and rivals fight about anything and everything. Uh, well, the roots of rivalry, I mean, very philosophically or theoretically, lie with the idea of fear, or the prospect of fear, and honor or prestige, and also interest. And also rivalries focus as types on maybe and on spatial aspects, that is different regions, different countries. It can be very ideological, which is not very strong in today's world, but it is very positional. So what we see, rivalries between the USA and China, or China and India, we can see as a strong positional kind of type. Uh, so if we want to really understand in our real life situations, who are the rivals, and what are the so it's not the exhaustive kind of manifestation. So you can, what I think, I mean, at the global level, I mean, we could see that Sino-American rivalry, or US-Russia competition, or rivalry to some extent, and Sino-Indian rivalry. And then we see a number of regional rivalry in different regions in the world, and they some of them are not as such great powers, but they are somehow in a situation that constitute rivalries. And well, so this is something how actually US and China, the rebalancing is changing from 224 I mean 2004 to 2014 and 2024, and there are some very common responses of the great powers in terms of hard balancing, soft balancing, or asymmetric balancing to rivalry. And when we come to Bangladesh and global powers, of course, foreign policy matters, and also some challenges that we see for Bangladesh, and that is the reason precisely that we are in this this discussion. And Professor Imtiaz also mentioned some of the challenges of Bangladesh, but I might bring some challenges also for Bangladesh. Well, foreign policy is really very important, but it has become very, very complicated. And there are scholars who do not even want to accept the idea of foreign policy. And the idea of foreign is also very debated. I mean, there is a debate inside, outside, or domestic and foreign. But even with this debate, with this controversy, we are used to the term of foreign policy, and there are determinants of foreign policy that we teach or we know. I mean, from very basic understandings, say internal, external, or agency structure and norms. And the foreign policy decision making, it might be very top-down approach based on hierarchy, or it can be pluralist. But the point is that this foreign policy for Bangladesh or for that matter any country, it's very important because by foreign policy actually we want to uh, achieve certain resources from the world, from the external world, beyond the borders, beyond the boundaries. This is very important. We may call it foreign policy, or we may call it international relations, or we may call it by any name, but we need to address the world beyond the border, the world beyond boundary. So I don't know. I mean, what is the right term to actually to conceptualize it? That what when we formulate policy to address that part, whether they are state actors or non-state actors. So, well, so major challenges of Bangladesh at this moment, of course, there are X number of challenges of Bangladesh foreign policy, but uh, at this moment, I mean, from a very uh, higher perspective, what I believe, I mean, everybody is also, some of you definitely will agree and may add more. But Sino-Indian rivalry, I mean, this is very, very important challenge for not only for Bangladesh, for many countries in this region. And US-China rivalry is also very important because if you see the US national security strategy of 2017, the United States has very clearly mentioned China and Russia as the threats to their security, very clearly. I mean, and if you contrast Obama's national security strategy, Obama actually identified rather non-state actors, rather terrorism as the number one threat. But Trump administration has put it in a very different way. So you can see the manifestation of this rivalry, and also there are some strategic rivalries in the Middle East. We can see what is happening between Iran and Saudi Arabia, and also Turkey, and what is happening between also Israel and Iran, and the role of United Arab Emirates in terms of establishing diplomatic relations with Israel. This is actually changing the geopolitics in the Middle East. And Rohingya crisis is a huge challenge for Bangladesh. Climate change and economic diplomacy is also very, very important challenge for Bangladesh. It covers almost all the economic development issues in terms of trade, in terms of investment, technology, and also migration. Now, with all these empirical or conceptual phenomena, of course, then we can actually apply some of the very, very common higher theories, and so since it is my job is to actually bring the debate. So we can see. Of course, I mean, we can apply realism with it has, I mean, different types or variants, and you can see classical realism or defensive realism or offensive realism and structural realism, and these are somehow relevant to understand what is happening in the world and to understand how Bangladesh could respond to not only to the behavior of the global powers, and also and also other powers, and you can see, I mean, we are all this platform, I think you all know about, some of you might know about the basic focus on of the realism. I mean, the focusing on the survival of the states, and also focusing on anarchy, international anarchy as an important condition that actually forces states to go for some self-help mechanisms, or in that case the self-defense mechanisms, which also creates security dilemma, is another fallout. And what is important, of course, from realist point of view, we can see it's a hegemonic tendency. If we focus on the theory of John Mearsheimer, and who actually expanded the idea of offensive realism in terms of explaining that states go beyond survival. So it's a survival plus for states who actually become dominant, and then so this theory can help. And then structural realism also quite relevant to understand the behavior of great powers in terms of, and also other powers, like how structure actually influences the units or different states in the world as agencies. Uh, and then, so liberalism has also very strong tradition, and which has its own focus, particularly, some definitely disagree the idea of Kantian liberalism, that is democratic peace, which is, of course, which is not always the case, but there is a very strong uh, uh, advocacy by the liberals that the democracies, promote peace at interstate level, and also the most important contribution of liberalism is to focus on the institutions to promote cooperation. So when we say friendship to all and malice towards none, basically it requires institutions, it requires cooperative environment. So there we see that the new liberal institutionalism is very, very important. And then complex interdependence by Joseph Nye and Robert Cohen and others who focused on complex interdependence, and subsequently as a globalized and integrated, interconnected world, despite the tendencies towards far right ideologies or ultranationalism. And we can, of course, apply constructivism as a very powerful theory, and which has been applied by several in the context of IR. And I particularly I'm fascinated by the idea that when structural realist talks about the role of international system, where actually anarchy has a role, and also military capabilities. But here you see, we can also understand international system by idea. So when we see the distribution of power or hierarchy of capabilities among the states, and creating a system that actually constrain the behavior of states or facilitate the behavior of the state to achieve certain goals. But here we can see that this distribution of ideas that can define international system, and this is this distribution of values and principles across the global system is quite fascinating. And I think what Professor Imtiaz Ahmed talked about, civilizational roots of foreign policy or IR. It has some relevance, that civilization is also one of the sources of ideas. And so the constructivists have a very strong point. And Karl Deutsch, and there are other people, and Alexander Wendt, also very important to who has said that anarchy is what states make of it. So constructivism is also becoming more and more important when we try to actually break away or go beyond the so-called realist or liberal traditions of understanding of foreign policy. And there are others, of course, theories. We can follow the critical theory, and which includes postmodernism or post-structuralism. The agency structure debate is very important. There are systemic traditions, nested politics, and also feminism is also very important to understand even foreign policy. So now coming to Bangladesh, so this is a sort of figure I have borrowed from one scholar. This is quite relevant, that how actually great powers create sort of hegemonic shocks, and the shocks come through coercion, inducements, and emulation. And then it has impact on at the domestic level. And here Bangladesh is in a position, or for that matter, I mean, not only Bangladesh, I mean, Sri Lanka or any country uh, who are not so-called great powers, or I mean, any member of the international relations, I mean, society could actually face this reality because of great powers, their focus, their role, their and as we understand it in today's world, more by rivalry. So coercion, inducements, and emulation are I mean, are some of the uh, tools or mechanisms that can come as sort of pressures or shocks, hegemonic shocks to the countries. So Bangladesh, conceptually speaking, well, what Bangladesh can do? I mean, Bangladesh can directly facilitate or even deter actions that great powers care deeply about. Or Bangladesh can be locations for coercive projection with some great powers, and it can also participate in great power-led international institutions that we saw even in the Cold War period, that some countries, they left non-alignment and they aligned, and Pakistan is one of the examples. And Bangladesh can maintain selective engagement and autonomy, and more from theoretical point of view. I mean, well, Bangladesh has realist options like bandwagoning, strategic hedging, uh, which actually says that Bangladesh can have very productive relations with all the great powers, and as sort of hedging, and Bangladesh can follow a sort of deterrence and graveyard strategy, which says that we have to be prepared for war every time, even to make peace. And liberal options, which actually Bangladesh is following very strongly. I mean, multilateralism and the idea of balanced approach, and also to some extent non-alignment, that we are following the traditions in not only in our foreign policy, also in our history. I mean, when our I mean, the father of the nation, Bangabandhu, mentioned about, Professor Imtiaz mentioned it, that he said about, I mean, friendship to all, malice towards none. So it says something in liberal tone. And constructivist options also is a combination of both, and also the ideas and interest, and also leadership matters, and state capacity. But what I think, well, we can follow different theories, and but what is very important for Bangladesh foreign policy to deal with the great powers, or the situations that we see in the world, that is, state capacity is very important. I mean, but this is not very realist type of state capacity. I mean, it is something which is very multidimensional and comprehensive. So we have to focus more on our internal resources in terms of people, in terms of history, in terms of knowledge and culture. And finally, well, I mean, in the conclusion, what I think, the theoretical debate on the foreign policy, or different uh, different aspects of foreign policy, it will continue, and this continuity is a very good part of actually, I mean, understanding option, and taking option, selecting option. But what we see it in reality, I mean, of course, as a student of IR, I mean, we see in the case of Bangladesh, and also beyond that, there is a negligence of theory and philosophy in dealing with foreign policy issues in Bangladesh. I mean, we can see that people feel that, well, I mean, we can actually deal with situations just by having data, or having some empirical evidence, and that is quite dangerous in the current era of social media. And that's why I mentioned that, well, we can see some blind pursuit of emulation of ideas, whether it is from the West or from other countries. And what I see in today's world, there is sort of Google solutions. I mean, whatever problem we have, we can Google, and we can find different concepts, and we can speak, and we can think that we can produce the policy or formulate the policy. I think this is very dangerous, not only in Bangladesh, many parts of the world. So the knowledge of IR is very important. Google cannot actually solve the problems. So it can help to some extent, but this is not what actually can lead us to solve the problems. So what we face today, of course, everybody will agree that it's a very complex reality of international relations, and of course, no option is perfect. So whether it is theoretical option or empirical option or policy options, so we need to debate more and more, and of course we have to focus on ideas from different sources, from west or from east, from north or from south. So this is very important. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Dilbar. I guess if I were to take the punch from your presentation, I would argue that in your concluding remarks, you said that negligence of theory and philosophy in foreign policy. I guess that is very important. And this is something which Imtiaz was also referring to when he was talking about the civilizational quest and the civilizational roots and foundations of foreign policy. We have many practitioners of foreign policy amongst us today. Former students of IR are also here. So we are now opening up the floor for discussion. And Dr. Niloy, Atik, Dr. Ashraf, they are there. If there are any questions in the chat box or in the Facebook, they will read those out. Otherwise, the floor is open. And I would request the participants and our distinguished guests and the practitioners of foreign policy, if they can just introduce themselves and ask the questions, the floor is open for discussion.
And we have Ambassador Samsher Mubin Chaudhry, Ambassador Mohsin Khan. Both of them have raised their hand, so one of them can start,
Yes,
please.
Ambassador Shamshir Mubin Chaudhry, please.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the organizers. The exercise of introspection of any state policy, be it foreign policy, domestic policy, history, culture, is very, very important. And I think we certainly owe a great deal of gratitude to the organizers today for organizing this. I mean, I don't know how much this is really done in Bangladesh, as seriously as it's done even on neighboring countries like India. And if you read books by Indian foreign policy practitioners, past and present, you'll see that very unbiased opinions are expressed, especially when they write about the foreign policy of India and not their individual actions as foreign policy practitioners. And two books come to mind, which I think is really worth going through. One is by Shivshankar Menon. It's called Choices, Inside the Making of Indian Foreign Policy. Now, Shivshankar Menon is one of the brightest minds I have known, and I'm very close to him. The very recent one is by the current Foreign Minister of India, S. Jaishankar. Is called The India Way. Again, while he is part of the current government in India, and a very important key post he's holding, he is not holding back on being critical on where things could have been done better by any government, not just by the present government or the past one. So this is, I think, we have an inhibition here, how candid and how frank we are allowed to be. So I will not go into too much into the deliberation. I think both the presentations by Dr. Imtiaz and Professor Dilbar have been very informative and instructive. Before I go into making one or two points about Bangladesh myself, I'll say that I think Professor Dilbar has very correctly pointed out certain things. First, he said that foreign policy is perpetually changing because the global scenario is perpetually changing. International relations is perpetually changing. There's a great deal of unpredictability. And the challenge for a country like Bangladesh is to be able to react or adapt to the unpredictability, none of which we actually control. all of this are beyond our, we are having to react to this. Reactive foreign policy is not necessarily a bad thing. We have to realize that what is our limitations. The other thing that Professor Delwar said very well is the options that he spelled out. I would go for the liberal option. For a country like Bangladesh, it is best to go for the liberal and the constructive option rather than a more challenging option, because we are, as we are, where we are placed. The third thing, and then I'll come to my own points on where Bangladesh stands and how it can make, is Professor Delwar's reference to state capacity. That what are the capacities or capabilities we have, and this relates to our history, our culture, and ideas, not just human resources, but ideas. So at the Dhaka dialogue that was held last year, and I wrote a big piece on it, I'll just read out from there what I had said there. That geographically, Bangladesh sits on the top of the Bay of Bengal and shares its maritime and land boundaries with India and Myanmar. It is the coupling, Bangladesh is the coupling in the chain that connects South and Southeast Asia. So here we look at two huge areas, swathes of land that is central to the whole emergence of a multipolar Asia. And it is this that gives Bangladesh its geopolitical relevance. Through the Indian Ocean, we connect to the Pacific Ocean and all the rest of it. The other thing is that for us, the challenge is that how do we strive to protect and ensure our national, economic, political interest, at the same time, keep a happy balance with strategic partners and strategic friends. This is a very, very big challenge for Bangladesh. We cannot underestimate this. Now let's see what Bangladesh brings to the table. Income country. That is, we have recorded an enviable growth rate, especially the socio-economic sectors. In many cases, we have overtaken. And this is a credit to the people of the country and the enabling atmosphere created by successive governments. We have one of the largest middle classes in the world, and it is growing. So our consumption value, consumer value, that we are a big consumer society, brings us, gives us greater relevance in a world which is dominated by economy. The next point is that we can be very proud of our being a secularized society. I'll not just use the word secularism as such. I'll say we are a secularized society. We have been from the beginning, and we have continued to be a secularized society. This is our national societal character. The next point, 2 years, I think there is a major factor, a social factor that empowers women in Bangladesh. And a society where women are empowered is inherently an antibody to any form of radicalism. Number one, it is an antibody to reckless population growth, because a woman who is empowered, who is a working woman, will be very careful what kind of a family she or he can afford in terms of time and effort. We have good record of girls' education policy. Now, importantly, since we're talking of foreign policy and diplomacy, Bangladesh believes in the principle of using diplomacy as the primary tool for promoting its Just 1 minute.
Shamsher, if
Just
I'm
give me just give me half a minute. We have a very highly respected military, and it is globally respected. So what we have been able to establish, especially with giving refuge to these Myanmar Rohingyas, that we are a responsible neighbor and can be the virtue that Bangladesh foreign policy and diplomacy should be based on. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Yes, Ambassador Mohsen, you have to unmute yourself, please.
Uh,
Thank you.
Sir, you were muted again, sir. Please unmute yourself.
can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I would like to thank you, the Department of International Relations, Dhaka University International Relations Department, you all for organizing such an important issue, and thank you for inviting me and others. It is really an occasion that I cherish very much. And I would like to thank Professor Imtiaz and Professor Delwar and also Amena Mohsin for organizing these. I have very attentively listened to what Professor Imtiaz Ahmed and Delwar Hussain have said. And now I'd like to say a few words about my observation. Professor Imtiaz paper dealt with a lot of new ideas that he threw on Bangladesh foreign policies, development, growth, etc., etc., where he spelled about the growth of cultural diplomacy and others also, citing about Bangabandhu's principle of foreign policy. It is true that Bangabandhu said that friendship to all and malice to none. And till today, we are following this. As you know, that foreign policy of a country is the persuasion of its national interest for the benefit of the people for the country. When, as diplomat, I am posted abroad, I seek to promote the national interest. For example, my case, I would like to say, then when I was High Commissioner of Bangladesh in Canada, I facilitated the duty-free market access to Bangladeshi products to Canada. Meaning that I tried to get the market duty-free thing for garments of our Bangladeshi garments to Canada. So this kind of effort we have done. So now what I would like to say that we have to make proactive foreign policy for Bangladesh as well as better proactive that will be helpful. Another thing is that Professor Imtiaz has also dealt with it and Professor Delwar has also dealt with this. That is the question of our foreign policy.
We lost connection.
Yeah,
I think we lost connection.
uh, uh, Professor Khagra from Nepal raised hand earlier.
Yes, Professor Khagra.
Hey, good evening, Professor.
Good evening.
Good evening. So I'm so glad to see Professor Imtiaz Ahmad. After 21 years ago, I saw him in Kathmandu in RCSS workshop for the first time, and Amina Mohsin, ma'am, also some 19 years ago in Dulikhel, Kathmandu. So my friend Professor Rashid, and very glad to see you all distinguished professor and practitioner, diplomats, and graduate students of Dhaka University and elsewhere in Bangladesh. So there are some graduate students from my department and some of the professors also joined here this evening. thank you so much once again for Dhaka University IR department for keeping me in your loop, especially in editorial board.
Thank
So I'm really much grateful to Imtiaz sir and Amina ma'am and everyone, those who love me and of course my department and university for this opportunity. So actually, we often talk in Kathmandu how Bangladesh leaders are crafty, especially to make balance between China and India. So of course, being a nation state, Nepal is quite like older nation state, and Imtiaz Shah has rightly pointed out in his lecture that Litchivi era was in Nepal and a Republican setup and Republican discourse was a pioneer in Nepal in Litchivi era. So even we did like during Litchivi era, we had developed a soft power with China, especially in Tibet. Buddhism was brought to Tibet from Litchivi Princess Prikuti, who got married with a Tibetan prince, Songtsong Gompo, who built the Potala Palace. So this is the soft power what we developed in 7th century, and since then we had really we also feel proud being keeping balanced relationship between the southern and northern empire. However, in recent decades and years, we often discuss that how we can learn from Bangladesh. While listening Professor Imtiaz and Professor Delaware this evening, I'm really, and most of our colleagues from Nepal, they were really much enlightened because of their in-depth knowledge and experiences in this domain. And I just wanted to, it's kind of like query to both professor, while Professor Delaware was speaking about selective engagement and in a sense liberal belief on which we believe on multilateralism. So selective engagement and vis-a-vis kind of multiple engagement. It seems like that Bangladesh has very successfully managed her relationship with being a BRI country. She has she has been she has been deepening her engagement with China, even in maritime security also. In the meantime, her engagement with India is a really almost like problem free. However, you did have some border dispute as well a while ago. So whether the role of leadership, idiosyncrasy is more important than geopolitics or political economy or political stability, what else is the key determining factor to maintain the balanced relationship between two giant neighbors? Seems not like selective engagement. It seems like that balance and multiple engagement of Bangladesh. So that is a really successful foreign policy. It's a kind of like I believe from a bit from Nepal. What I would like to know whether the leadership of Bangladesh has made possible or any other like tips, any reason behind having maintained this balanced relationship between India and China. So would be grateful to both professor if you could let us know for all like Nepali academia. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much once again, ma'am and sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll take two more questions, then maybe the panelists or the speakers can respond. I have a request from from Naeem. He's a former student of ours, and currently he's the Consul General of Bangladesh, based in Toronto. He wanted to uh, have a question. You have a question, Naeem? If you are around, you send me a message.
Madam, just I have to 1 minute
Yes.
intervention type something. Thank you very much, madam. First of all, let me have a little bit of prelude, since I'm seeing my so respected teachers after decades, I should say, especially Professor Imtiaz sir, Delwar Hussain sir, and Amina Mohsin, Ashika Ishad, I saw Shahidul Zaman. I can see all of these great teachers and whom we feel proud of and whom we always refer to. Madam, it was a fascinating discussion, and I am so honored to be part of this discussion. Just I have a few points to mention. The presentation I have listened, I mean, I have seen as well, Professor Imtiaz and Professor Dilwar, both of them were fascinating, no match. Uh, but always I remember, well, as you understand, I'm a foreign policy practitioner. I always remember Professor Imtiaz always taught us that everything has a cost. That I didn't forget, sir, yet I didn't forget it. Everything, every action, 24 hours, 24/7, anytime, whatever you do, that has a cost. This is first predominant, number one. Number two, the Kautilya's dictum, it never went off. It is always there. So starting from there, third, Amina Mohsin always taught us that, say, foreign policy is the extension of our domestic policy, while she was teaching us the theory.